The text message arrived just as the nurse was hooking up my third round of chemotherapy. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I'll have my things out by Friday." My vision blurred as I stared at my phone screen, the words swimming before my eyes. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not from David, my husband of 7 years, my college sweetheart, the man who'd promised, in sickness and in health, just 4 years earlier. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's video reveals exactly how I turned this rock-bottom moment into the breakthrough that changed everything. I tried calling him immediately, the IV tugging at my arm as I shifted in the recliner, straight to voicemail. I texted back, "What are you talking about? Call me." No response. I tried again. Nothing. "Everything okay, Eliza?" asked Monica, my regular chemo nurse, concern etching her kind face as she adjusted my drip rate. "My husband just left me. By text. During my chemo session," I said, my voice sounding hollow and far away, like it belonged to someone else. "Oh, honey," she said, squeezing my shoulder. I don't even have words. Neither did I. I sat there, numb, as the toxic chemicals designed to kill the stage 3 breast cancer cells flowed into my body. 35 years old, fighting for my life, and now, apparently, single. The diagnosis had come 4 months earlier, during what should have been the most exciting time of my career. My health tracking app, WellTrack, had just secured its first round of serious funding after 3 years of bootstrapping. My team of 6 was finally moving out of my home office into a real workspace. The future looked bright, until I found the lump during a shower. Things moved quickly after that. Biopsy, diagnosis, surgery, the start of aggressive chemotherapy. David had seemed supportive at first, accompanying me to appointments, researching treatment options, holding my hair back when I was violently ill after the first round of chemo. But I'd noticed the shift over the past few weeks. His increasing absences, coming home late from working, the way he avoided looking directly at my body, now altered by surgery and my progressively thinning hair. Still, I never expected this. Not abandonment during the 1 hour of the week when I was literally tethered to an IV pole. I somehow made it through the remaining 2 hours of my infusion in a fog of shock and disbelief. My friend Tara was picking me up today, as she had insisted on driving me to treatments whenever her schedule as a freelance graphic designer allowed. When she walked into the infusion center with her bright smile and reusable shopping bag full of my favorite post-chemo snacks, I broke down. "Eliza, what happened?" She rushed over, kneeling beside my chair. I wordlessly handed her my phone with David's message still open. "That absolute worthless piece of—" she began, her face flushing with anger. "Ma'am, please remember this is a treatment area," Monica interjected gently, but her eyes conveyed she shared the sentiment. "Let's get you home," Tara said, helping me into my cardigan. "I'm staying with you tonight. No arguments." The drive to my house in the Oakland Hills was a blur. All I could think about was whether David would already be there, packing up his life while I'd been fighting for mine. The house had been our dream, a fixer-upper with a view of the bay, purchased with my initial app development profits and David's salary as a marketing executive. We'd spent weekends painting walls and refinishing floors, planning for the future, for the family we hoped to have once my company was stable. Now, as Tara pulled into the driveway, I noticed David's Tesla was gone. A small mercy. I wasn't ready to face him yet. Inside, everything looked normal at first. The living room was untouched, photos of our life together still arranged on the mantel, hiking in Yosemite, our wedding day, the company launch party, where David had proudly introduced himself as the spouse of the genius founder. Had that pride turned to resentment as my company grew and demanded more of my time? Had my cancer diagnosis been the final straw that broke his image of our perfect life? "I'll make some tea," Tara said, heading to the kitchen while I sank onto the couch, still wearing my chemo uniform of soft leggings and an oversized sweater. That's when I noticed it. The office door was ajar and the light was on. David's laptop was normally set up at the desk in the corner of our shared home office, where he often worked remotely. I forced myself up from the couch and walked slowly down the hallway, a sense of dread building with each step. The office was in disarray, but only on David's side. His ergonomic chair was gone, along with his laptop, second monitor, and the framed MBA diploma that had hung on the wall. His drawers were pulled open, hastily emptied of their contents. On the desk was a legal-sized envelope with my name scrawled across it. My hand trembled as I picked it up. Inside were printed bank statements for an account I didn't recognize, withdrawal slips, and a brief handwritten note. "Eliza, I've tried to be supportive, but I can't watch you deteriorate. The stress of your illness and the company is too much. I need to focus on my own career and future. I've already consulted an attorney. Half the house is mine, plus a share of WellTrack since I supported you while you built it. I've taken what I believe I'm entitled to as an advance. I'm sorry it ended this way. David." I stared at the papers, my oncologist's warnings about stress and elevated heart rates during treatment, floating somewhere in the back of my mind. But all I could focus on was the account statement showing a transfer of $212,000 from our joint savings account, money we'd set aside for both emergencies and future WellTrack development. Money we'd need for my ongoing cancer treatment, as my insurance didn't cover all the expenses. "Tara!" I called out, my voice breaking. "He took the money. Our money." She rushed in, tea forgotten, and took the papers from my shaking hands. Her face darkened as she read. "This can't be legal," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling. Me right now." Mei Jiang had been Tara's roommate in law school and now worked at a prestigious Silicon Valley law firm specializing in both family law and tech startups. We'd met several times at social gatherings, and she'd even given me informal advice when I was setting up my company. While Tara stepped into the hallway to make the call, I sank into my desk chair, staring blankly at my computer screen where a WellTrack development deadline reminder blinked insistently. How was I supposed to lead a company and fight a legal battle while also fighting for my life? The weight of it all pressed down until I could barely breathe. My phone buzzed. A text. From Parker, my lead developer and WellTrack's CTO. "How'd treatment go? Still up for our 4 p.m. check-in about the algorithm updates?" Reality crashed back in. I had a company to run, employees who depended on me, investors who had trusted their money to my vision, and I had advanced aggressive cancer that wasn't going. To pause for my personal crisis, I texted back, "Need to reschedule. Family emergency. Can we do tomorrow morning?" Parker's response was immediate. "Of course. Everything okay?" Nothing was okay. My husband had abandoned me during chemo and cleaned out our savings account. My company was at a critical growth stage that needed my full attention. My body was at war with itself, the treatment almost as brutal as the disease. "I'll explain later," I replied. "Thanks for understanding." Tara returned, her expression slightly less murderous, which I took as a good sign. "May says to secure all your financial accounts immediately. Change passwords, freeze credit, everything. She's coming over tonight after work to go through everything in detail, but her first take is that David's actions constitute financial fraud, especially during your active medical crisis." I nodded, pulling out my laptop to begin the process of financial damage control. "Did you tell her about the note? His claim to WellTrack?" "Yes. She says his claim is dubious at best, especially since you founded the company before your marriage. But we need to see your operating agreements, cap table, everything." As I logged into our bank accounts, the devastation became clearer. David hadn't just taken money from our joint savings. He'd also maxed out our shared credit cards and taken a personal loan against his 401k, where he'd listed me as a co-signer. A digital trail of betrayal stretching back weeks, restaurant charges at places I'd never been, hotel bills in the city where we lived, a $3,400 purchase at a high-end jewelry store just last week. "He's been planning this," I said quietly, turning the screen so Tara could see. "And he's been seeing someone else." Tara's expression confirmed my suspicion before she could find words. "That absolute—" "Let's focus on what I can control right now," I interrupted, even as the room seemed to tilt around me. The post-chemo fatigue was setting in, compounded by emotional shock. I need to secure the company accounts first. WellTrack had started as a simple idea 4 years ago, born from my background in both healthcare data science and app development. After watching my mother struggle to coordinate her care between specialists for her rheumatoid arthritis, I'd created a comprehensive health tracking system that integrated everything from medication schedules to symptom patterns, vitals, and appointment management in one secure, user-friendly interface. What had begun as a passion project had evolved into a promising startup with a growing user base and, more recently, interest from several healthcare systems looking to license a professional version of the platform. The recent $1.2 million seed round was meant to fund our expansion, enhance the AI capabilities, and bring on additional developers. David had been supportive of my entrepreneurial journey, but always in the background. He'd never invested his own money, had no official role in the company, and wasn't listed on any company documents. But he had been there through the lean early years, covering more household expenses while I poured myself into building WellTrack. Would a court see that as entitling him to a share of the company now? I couldn't risk it. With shaking fingers, I changed all the administrative passwords to our company accounts, banking platforms, and development repositories. Then, I sent an encrypted message to my small executive team, Parker, my CTO, Zoe, our operations manager, and Aiden, our head of business development. Emergency situation. Need to meet ASAP. Personal matter affecting company security. Available for virtual meeting in 1 hour. All 3 responded within minutes, agreeing to the meeting. That was one of the benefits of a small, dedicated team. They understood that. In a startup, the line between personal and professional was often blurred. "You should rest before that meeting," Tara said, gently closing my laptop. "You just had chemo, Eliza." She was right. The familiar wave of bone-deep fatigue and nausea was intensifying. I allowed her to help me to my bedroom, where I discovered more evidence of David's calculated exit. His closet was half empty, drawers pulled open with remaining items strewn about. On his nightstand was a framed photo of us from happier days, the glass now cracked. Whether accidentally or deliberately, I couldn't tell. "He left in a hurry," Tara observed, helping me into bed. "May will be here at 7. Try to sleep a little. Before then." As she drew the blinds against the afternoon light, another text came through on my phone. David, finally responding. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. I've been unhappy for a long time. Your cancer made me realize life is too short to stay in a marriage that isn't working. I deserve happiness too. My lawyer will contact you about the house and company division. Focus on getting better." The breathtaking selfishness of his message left me speechless. I handed the phone to Tara, who read it and immediately deleted it, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't need this right now," she said firmly. "May will handle him. Sleep." Despite my racing mind, the post-chemotherapy exhaustion won out, and I fell into a restless sleep filled with unsettling dreams, of falling, of running through empty hospital corridors, of watching David walk away while I was tangled in IV, lines that kept stretching but wouldn't break. I woke to gentle shaking in Tara's voice. "Eliza, it's time for your emergency meeting. I've set up your laptop in the kitchen. I made you some ginger tea and toast to settle your stomach." The digital clock read 5 p.m. I'd slept for nearly 2 hours but felt no more rested. Still, I forced myself up, smoothing my thinning hair and pulling a soft beanie over my head, more to combat the chills that followed chemo than out of vanity at this point. In the kitchen, my laptop was open on the counter, showing the familiar grid of my team's faces in our secure conference platform. I took a steadying breath and joined the call. "Hey, everyone. Thanks for making yourselves available on short notice," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Eliza, are you okay?" Zoe asked immediately. At 50, she was the oldest member of our team, a former hospital administrator who joined WellTrack after experiencing firsthand the problems our system aimed to solve. She had a mother's intuition that could detect trouble from a continent away. There was no point in hiding the situation. These people weren't just my employees. They were my partners in building something that mattered. And right now, they needed to know that our company might be at risk. "No, I'm not okay," I admitted. "I had chemo today, and during my infusion, my husband informed me by text that he's leaving me. He's also taken a substantial amount of money from our joint accounts, and he's claiming he's entitled to a portion of WellTrack." The shocked silence was broken by Parker's low whistle. At 29, he was a brilliant developer who'd turned down positions at major tech firms to join my startup because he believed in our mission after his own father's struggle with Parkinson's disease. "That's... wow." "What do you need from us?" he asked. "Practically. First, security," I said. "I've already changed all the administrative passwords, but I need each of you to update your credentials as well. Parker, can you implement the enhanced security protocol we discussed for the development repository?" He nodded, already typing. "On it. I'll set up two-factor authentication for all team members and review our access logs to make sure there haven't been any unusual activities. Zoe, I need you to contact our bank and make sure David hasn't attempted to access any company accounts. His name isn't on any of the business documents, but he knows a lot about our operations. Consider it done," she said, her expression grim. "And I'll review all recent transactions just to be safe. Aiden, this is sensitive, but I need you to contact our investors," I continued, turning to our business development lead, a former pharmaceutical sales rep with connections throughout the healthcare industry. "Don't go into personal details, but let them know we're implementing enhanced security measures due to a potential internal threat. Reassure them that company assets and intellectual property are secure." "Of course," he agreed. "I'll be discreet, but thorough." As my team jumped into action, I felt a surge of gratitude that momentarily overshadowed the betrayal and shock. These people weren't just protecting a company, they were protecting me, stepping up without hesitation during my moment of crisis. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice catching slightly. "Given my ongoing treatment and now this situation, I may need to adjust my work schedule in the coming weeks. I'm not stepping back from leadership," I added quickly, "but I might need more flexibility. I'll need all of you to take on additional responsibilities." "Whatever you need," Parker said immediately. "We've got this." "That's what a team is for," Zoe added warmly. "You focus on your health and legal situation. We'll keep WellTrack moving forward." As we wrapped up the meeting with specific action items assigned to each team member, I felt a complex mix of emotions: devastation at David's betrayal, anxiety about my health and financial security, but also a fierce determination not to let either my cancer or my husband's abandonment destroy what I'd built. The doorbell rang just as I was ending the call. Tara went to answer it while I stayed at the kitchen counter, scrolling through company documents to prepare for my meeting with May. From the entryway, I heard not just Tara's voice, but another familiar one that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Where is she? How is she doing? That was my brother, Lucas, whose software engineering job usually kept him anchored in Seattle. I stood as he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tall frame filling the space, his expression a mix of fury and concern. Behind him was May, looking every bit the high-powered attorney in her tailored suit despite the late hour. "Lucas? How did you—" I began. "Tara called me," he said, crossing the kitchen in 3 long strides and pulling me into a careful hug. I got on the first flight down. No one treats my sister like this. No one. The careful control I'd maintained through the team meeting crumbled at his familiar presence, and I let myself cry for the first time since receiving David's text. Not delicate tears, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that left me gasping for breath. Lucas held me through it, murmuring reassurances, while Tara and May moved quietly around the kitchen, setting up an impromptu command center at my dining table with laptops, legal pads, and the documents I'd already gathered. When my tears finally subsided, Lucas guided me to the table where a fresh cup of ginger tea waited. "Let's fight back," he said simply. May spread out several file folders, her efficiency somehow comforting in the midst of chaos. "First thing to understand, Eliza, what David has done constitutes financial abandonment and possibly fraud, especially given your medical condition. California has specific protections for spouses undergoing medical crises. He claims he's entitled to half the house and part of my company," I said, showing her David's note. May scanned it quickly. "The house is a separate issue we'll address. Community property laws in California make that complicated. But his claim to WellTrack is much weaker, especially if we can document that you founded it before your marriage." "I did," I confirmed. "The initial LLC filing was 14 months before our wedding. I have all the documentation." "Excellent," May said, making notes. "And his role in the company was non-existent officially. He's never been an employee, officer, investor, or even a formal advisor. But," I added reluctantly, "he did contribute more to our household expenses during the first 2 years while I was building the company without a salary, and he's connected me with some industry contacts through his marketing work." "Supporting a spouse through entrepreneurship doesn't automatically create an ownership stake," May replied. "But we should prepare for him to argue that his financial support constituted an investment." Lucas, whose technical background included enough startup experience to understand the implications, leaned forward. "What about intellectual property? All the code, algorithms, is that protected?" "Yes," I said with certainty. "All developers, including me, sign comprehensive IP assignments to the company. David has never written a line of code for WellTrack." "Good," May said, making more notes. "Now let's talk about the immediate financial issues. How much did he take?" I pulled up the bank statements on my laptop. "At least $212,000 from our joint savings, plus about $30,000 in credit card charges and cash advances over the past month, and a $78,000 loan against his 401k, where I'm apparently a co-signer, though I never signed anything." May's eyebrows shot up. "That last part is particularly problematic. For him. If you didn't authorize that co-signature, it's fraud. We'll need to contest that immediately." "The money he took," Tara interjected, "that was for her cancer treatment, right? Doesn't that make it worse legally?" "Absolutely," May confirmed. "Taking funds needed for medical care from an ill spouse creates significant legal exposure for David. Judges have very little patience for that kind of behavior. As May outlined our immediate legal strategy, emergency motions to freeze assets, formal requests for financial disclosures, potential criminal complaints for the fraudulent loan, I felt strangely detached, as if we were discussing a case study, rather than my imploding life. "What about the company?" I asked, circling back to my primary concern. "How do I protect WellTrack while I'm dealing with all of this? And still undergoing cancer treatment?" May's expression softened slightly. "That's where having a strong team becomes crucial. From what you've described, you've already taken the right immediate steps. Next, we should consider bringing in temporary executive support, perhaps a fractional COO who specializes in guiding startups through crises." "I know several people who might fit the bill," Lucas offered, "from my incubator days." I nodded gratefully, but another thought was nagging at me. David knows everything about our upcoming partnership negotiations with Medicorp. He's been my sounding bored through the whole process. What if he uses that information somehow? May frowned. Did he sign any non-disclosure agreements regarding company business? No, I admitted. He's my husband. Was my husband. I trusted him. Then we need to get ahead of this, May decided. First thing tomorrow, you should inform any sensitive business partners about the situation. Not the personal details, but enough that they're warned about potential interference. And we should review those pending negotiations to identify any vulnerabilities. As our strategy session continued into the night, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from David. You changed the passwords to our accounts? Really mature, Eliza. My lawyer says taking money from joint accounts is perfectly legal. I'm entitled to it. Why is your brother's car at our house? You need to fight your battles. I silenced the phone without responding, on May's advice. Each message only confirmed what was becoming increasingly clear. The man I'd married, the partner I thought I'd had been replaced by someone calculating and cruel, someone willing to kick me when I was at my most vulnerable. Around midnight, exhaustion won out. May packed up her files with a promise to file emergency motions first thing in the morning. Tara, who had quietly prepped the guest room, headed to bed after making sure my anti-nausea medications were organized for the night. Lucas insisted on sleeping on the couch, positioning himself between me and any potential confrontation should David return unexpectedly. Alone in my bedroom, now stripped of half its contents, I finally allowed myself to fully process the day's events. In less than 12 hours, I'd gone from a cancer patient with a supportive husband and growing company to a cancer patient fighting a two-front war. One against the malignant cells in my body, another against the man who had vowed to stand by me through exactly this kind of crisis. I pulled out my journal, the one place I'd been documenting my cancer journey with unflinching honesty. Beneath my last entry about preparing for round 3 of chemo, I wrote, "Today David left me during my infusion. By text. He took our savings and is claiming part of my company. I am allowed to be devastated. I am allowed to be furious. But I am not allowed to give up. Not on my recovery, not on WellTrack, not on myself. This is not the end of my story." I closed the journal and placed it on my nightstand, next to the framed photo of my mother that had always given me strength. She had faced rheumatoid arthritis with unfailing grace for decades before her death 3 years ago. Her struggle had inspired WellTrack. Her strength would now inspire my fight. Tomorrow would bring legal battles, financial reckonings, and the continued physical ordeal of cancer treatment. But tonight, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not just survive this betrayal, I would ultimately thrive in spite of it. David thought he was leaving a weakened woman who would crumble. Without him, he would discover just how wrong he was. With that thought, I finally surrendered to sleep. My dreams no longer of hospitals and abandonment, but of boardrooms and victory. I woke to the sound of urgent voices in my living room. My body ached from yesterday's chemo, a familiar but unwelcome reminder that cancer wouldn't pause for my personal crisis. Pulling myself from bed, I wrapped a robe around my too thin frame and followed the voices. Lucas and Tara stood near the front window, peering through the blinds. May sat at my dining table, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in clipped legal terminology. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice still raspy from sleep. They all turned, startled by my presence. Lucas recovered first. "David's outside," he said, jaw tight. "With another man. They're taking things from his car." I crossed to the window and peeked through the blinds. Sure enough, there was David's Tesla, parked behind a sleek black Mercedes I didn't recognize. David and a silver-haired man in an expensive suit were removing boxes from David's trunk. My soon-to-be ex-husband looked irritated, gesturing emphatically as he spoke to the man I assumed was his attorney. "Perfect timing," May said, ending her call and joining us at the window. That's Richard Huntington with him, high-profile divorce attorney, known for aggressive tactics. Should I go out there? I asked, uncertain. Absolutely not, May replied firmly. In fact, I've just been granted an emergency hearing this afternoon regarding the financial issues. Judge Watkins wasn't pleased to hear about funds being removed during active cancer treatment. They're coming to the door, Tara warned. The doorbell rang, followed by David's voice calling my name through the door. Eliza, I know you're in there. I can see your brother's car. Lucas started toward the door, but May held up a hand. Let me handle this. As your attorney, I should be the one engaging. She straightened her jacket, smoothed her already immaculate hair, and opened the door with professional composure. Mr. Cole, I'm May Jang, representing Eliza Cole in this matter. And you must be Richard Huntington, she said, extending her hand to the silver-haired man. David tried to look past her into the house. I need to speak with my wife. Ex-wife in progress, Lucas muttered behind me, earning a warning glance from May. Mrs. Cole is unavailable at present, May stated firmly. As I'm sure you're aware, she received chemotherapy treatment yesterday, shortly before you informed her via text message that you were leaving the marriage. Huntington cleared his throat. Ms. Jang, my client is here to collect additional personal belongings. We're entitled to— You're not entitled to anything without proper documentation at this point, May interrupted smoothly. Particularly given the suspicious financial activities that occurred yesterday. I've secured an emergency hearing with Judge Watkins at 2 p.m. today. David's face flushed. Those were joint accounts, which you emptied while your wife was receiving cancer treatment, May countered. An interesting strategy, Mr. Cole. I'm curious how you believe that will play before a judge. The mention of a judge seemed to temper David's aggression. He exchanged glances with Huntington, who gave a subtle nod. We'll address these matters through proper legal channels then, Huntington said. In the meantime, we'll be filing our own motions regarding the company assets. By all means, May replied, unruffled. We look forward to demonstrating how a company founded before the marriage, in which Mr. Cole has no official role, constitutes a personal asset rather than community property. Now, if you'll excuse us, Mrs. Cole needs to rest before her medical appointments. As May began closing the door, David suddenly called out, Eliza, you can't hide behind lawyers. We need to talk. I stepped forward then, unable to resist the confrontation any longer. Lucas moved protectively to my side as I appeared in the doorway. The shock on David's face was almost worth the effort it took to stand there. I knew what he saw, my thinning hair partially covered by a silk scarf, my pallid complexion, the weight loss that made my robe hang loosely on my frame. But I stood, straight, meeting his eyes directly. There's nothing to talk about, David, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You made your choice, during my chemo infusion, by text. You stole our savings while I'm fighting for my life. Whatever we had is over. His expression flickered between guilt and defensiveness. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I cut him off. You couldn't handle sickness in our health. You decided my cancer and my company were too much for you. But make no mistake, you won't take WellTrack from me. That company exists because of my mother's illness, my coding skills, and my team's dedication. Not because of you. Huntington placed a warning hand on David's arm, but he shook it off. I supported you for years while you built that company, he argued. I'm entitled to what? I challenged. To the money I'll need for the treatments keeping me alive? To the company saving thousands of patients from the healthcare chaos that killed my mother? What exactly are you entitled to, David? The I. Raw emotion in my voice seemed to finally penetrate his self-righteous armor. He took a step back, momentarily speechless. We'll see you at the hearing, May said firmly, using the moment to close the door. As the lock clicked into place, my legs gave way. Lucas caught me before I could fall, guiding me to the couch. That was badass, Tara said, bringing me a glass of water and my morning medications. I managed a weak smile, though the confrontation had drained what little energy I had. Necessary, not badass. He needed to see he's not dealing with just a sick, abandoned wife. He's dealing with a founder who will fight for her company. May was already back at her laptop. That display of strength was useful legally as well. Huntington was evaluating you, trying to determine if you'd be a sympathetic figure before a judge. Now he knows you will be. What happens at the hearing today? Lucas asked, his protective instincts still on high alert. It's just a preliminary, emergency proceeding, May explained. We're asking for 3 things. An immediate return of a portion of the funds David took for Eliza's medical expenses, a freeze on the remaining joint assets until full financial disclosure occurs, and exclusive use of the house during Eliza's treatment. The mention of treatment reminded me to check my phone. I had a follow-up appointment with my oncologist, Dr. Hansen, at noon to evaluate how I was tolerating the chemotherapy. I need to be at Oakland Memorial by noon, I said, looking at the clock. It was already 9:30 a.m. I'll drive you, Lucas offered, immediately. Actually, I said, I need to stop by the office first. With everything happening, I need to check in with my team in person. Are you sure that's wise? Tara asked gently. You just had chemo yesterday. I nodded. It's necessary. WellTrack isn't just my company. It's what's keeping me going through all of this. Besides, I need to talk to Parker about something that might help our legal case. Lucas looked dubious but nodded. I'll take you wherever you need to go. While I showered and dressed, a process that took twice as long as it had before cancer, Tara prepared a protein-rich breakfast that my post-chemo stomach might tolerate. May continued preparing for the hearing, occasionally asking me to clarify details about finances or the company structure. By 10:30, Lucas and I were pulling up to the converted Victorian in Oakland's Temescal district that housed WellTrack's offices. The space reflected our company culture, warm, welcoming, but meticulously organized, with comfortable workspaces centered around a communal area where we held our daily stand-ups. Parker was the first to spot me when we entered, his usual energetic demeanor softening with concern as he took in my appearance. Eliza, he said, crossing the room quickly, we weren't expecting you in today. Necessary emergency, I replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Is everyone here? He nodded. Conference room in 5? Perfect. As Parker gathered the team, Lucas squeezed my shoulder. You sure you're up for this? I have to be, I replied simply. Within minutes, I was seated at the head of our conference table, facing the concerned expressions of my core team. Beyond Parker, Zoe, and Aiden, we'd added 3 junior developers in recent months, along with a QA specialist and a part-time UX designer. First, thank you all for your quick response to yesterday's security concerns. I began, skipping any pretense. I'd like to introduce my brother, Lucas Barrett, who many of you have heard me mention. He'll be helping us navigate some challenges in the coming weeks. Lucas nodded to the team as I continued. I need to be transparent about what's happening, as it could affect the company, I said, taking a deep breath. My husband David has left me, in the middle of my cancer treatment. He's taken a significant amount of joint funds, and his attorney is making claims against WellTrack itself. Shocked murmurs filled the room. Zoe's eyes flashed with protective anger, while Parker looked as though he might punch something or someone. Let me be absolutely clear, I continued, my voice steady despite my exhaustion. WellTrack is not in danger. The company is structured properly, with clear documentation of its founding prior to my marriage. However, we need to prepare for potential disruption and protect our upcoming negotiations with Medicorp. That bastard knows all about the Medicorp deal, Aiden said, forgetting professional decorum in his anger. Exactly why we need to act decisively, I confirmed. Parker, I need the original development logs from when WellTrack was just a concept. The GitHub commits, The early algorithm documentation? Everything that proves this was my creation pre-David. Parker nodded. Already pulled those files after our call yesterday. I've got everything backed up on a secure server, including your original whiteboard photos from your mom's spare bedroom. A wave of gratitude washed over me. Parker had been the first person I'd brought into WellTrack, back when it was just an idea born from my frustration with my mother's fragmented healthcare. He'd been there when I'd outlined the initial architecture on a whiteboard in my mother's house, taking photos that documented the company's earliest conceptual stage. Aiden. I turned to my business development lead. Where do we stand with Medicorp? Call scheduled for tomorrow, he reported. Should I postpone given the circumstances? I shook my head firmly. Absolutely not. We proceed as planned, but with additional safeguards. I want you to lead that call, with me joining as health permits. And I want to add confidentiality provisions that specifically prevent disclosure to non-company personnel. Zoe raised her hand slightly. I've completed the financial audit you requested. No evidence of any attempts to access company accounts, but I've implemented additional authentication requirements just in case. Perfect, I said, then addressed the full team. I know this situation is unexpected and potentially concerning. I want to assure all of you that my commitment to WellTrack remains absolute. This company isn't just a business to me, it's a mission inspired by my mother, and now, ironically, further validated by my own healthcare journey. I gestured to Lucas. My brother will be here regularly as I balance treatment with company leadership. I've also engaged excellent legal counsel. What I need from each of you is simply to continue the exceptional work you've been doing, with perhaps a bit more flexibility around my schedule. The team's response was immediate and heartening. Offers of help, expressions of support, and even a few creative suggestions for ensuring David couldn't interfere with our operations. Emma, our youngest developer who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. My aunt went through something similar during her breast cancer treatment. Her husband left, claiming he couldn't handle it. She's now 5 years cancer-free and just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Just saying. The unexpected story brought my first genuine smile in 24 hours. Thank you, Emma. That's exactly what I needed to hear. As the meeting concluded, Parker hung back while the others returned to their desks. Once we were alone, he handed me a flash drive. This contains everything we just discussed, plus something else I think might help, he said quietly. David visited the office about 2 weeks ago while you were at treatment. Said he was picking up something from your desk, but he spent nearly 30 minutes alone in your office. I thought it was odd, so I checked the security camera footage afterward. My stomach tightened. And? He was going through your files, electronic and physical, taking photos of documents with his phone. I didn't mention it then because, well, he was your husband. I figured he had legitimate reasons. The implications were serious. Did you see which files he accessed? Parker nodded grimly. Investor agreements, the Medicorp preliminary term sheet, and your patent application drafts. The footage is on here? I asked, holding up the flash drive. Yes. Along with logs showing exactly which electronic files were opened from your computer during that time frame. I slipped the drive into my bag, my mind racing despite my physical fatigue. Parker, this could be crucial evidence. Thank you for being observant. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing my job. We protect what matters, right? That's the WellTrack way. As Lucas and I left the office, heading toward my oncology appointment, I felt a complex blend of emotions: betrayal at David's apparent corporate espionage, gratitude for my team's loyalty, and a steely determination that was becoming my emotional baseline. You built something special there, Lucas commented as we drove. Not just the product, but the people. I nodded, clutching the flash drive that might prove critical to protecting what I'd built. They believe in the mission, and now they're part of a new one, making sure cancer and divorce don't destroy it. Speaking of which, Lucas said, glancing at me as he drove, are you really up for a legal hearing after your doctor's appointment? No one would blame you for needing to rest. I gazed out the window at Oakland Memorial Hospital looming ahead, where I'd soon receive updates on whether the chemicals coursing through my body were successfully killing the cancer cells. Cancer doesn't care about my divorce, and my ex-husband doesn't care about my cancer, I replied, a new hardness in my voice. So I don't have the luxury of resting. I need to fight on all fronts. Lucas looked worried but didn't argue further. As we pulled into the hospital parking lot, my phone chimed with a message from May. Judge granted emergency temporary restraining order before the hearing. David must return $100,000 to a supervised account for medical expenses within 24 hours. Small victory, but a significant one. I showed Lucas the message, a tiny spark of hope kindling within me. If I could win this small battle while attached to an IV pole, perhaps I could win the larger war against cancer, against David, against anyone who underestimated my resilience. As we walked toward the hospital entrance, I straightened my shoulders, despite the bone-deep fatigue. The road ahead would be grueling, but I was increasingly certain of one thing. Underestimating me would be everyone's biggest mistake. Dr. Hansen's office always smelled faintly of lavender, her small rebellion, against the harsh antiseptic scent that pervaded the rest of Oakland Memorial. As I sat across from her desk, watching her review my latest blood work results, I tried to focus on that comforting smell rather than the growing list of crises in my life. Your white cell count is lower than I'd like, she said finally, looking up from her tablet. Not dangerously so, but enough that we need to be vigilant about infection risk. I nodded, having expected this. The chemotherapy cocktail designed to kill my cancer cells was also suppressing my immune system, a brutal but necessary trade-off. What about the tumor markers? I asked, getting to the question that had been gnawing at me since my diagnosis. 4 months ago, Dr. Hansen's expression softened slightly. Down by 32% since we started treatment. That's actually quite good, Eliza. The protocol is working. Relief washed over me in a wave so powerful it momentarily drowned out thoughts of David, the company, the financial chaos. The treatment was working. The cancer that had ambushed me at 35 was retreating. That's the first good news I've had in days, I admitted, my voice catching. Lucas, who had insisted on joining me for the appointment, squeezed my hand. Dr. Hansen looked between us, her experienced eyes missing nothing. I understand you're going through additional stressors right now, she said carefully. Your nurse mentioned something about your home situation changing? I laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. My husband abandoned me via text message during yesterday's infusion. He emptied our joint accounts and is now making claims against my company. Dr. Hansen's professional composure slipped for just a moment, revealing shock and something close to anger before she regained her calm demeanor. I'm very sorry to hear that, Eliza. Stress can significantly impact treatment efficacy and recovery. Do you have adequate support in place? I gestured to Lucas. My brother's here from Seattle. I have friends helping, and a good attorney. And emotionally? She pressed gently. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the practical aspects of my dual crisis, cancer and divorce, that I'd barely acknowledged the emotional toll. I'm functioning, I said finally. I don't really have the luxury of falling apart right now. Dr. Hansen nodded, understanding but not entirely convinced. I'd like to refer you to Dr. Levine, our psycho-oncologist. She specializes in helping patients navigate the emotional aspects of cancer treatment, and she's particularly good with complex life situations. My first instinct was to refuse. Another appointment to juggle, another specialist to explain my situation to. But Lucas spoke before I could. She'll take the referral, he said firmly, ignoring my sharp look. My sister is incredibly strong, but even the strongest people need support. Dr. Hansen smiled at his intervention. Excellent. Now let's discuss your treatment plan going forward. The rest of the appointment focused on adjusting my medication to address the low white cell count and scheduling my next round of chemotherapy. By the time we left, I had a prescription for immune-boosting injections, 3 upcoming appointments, and a referral I wasn't sure I wanted. I don't have time for therapy, I told Lucas as we walked to the car. Between cancer, the company, and now this legal nightmare with David. That's exactly why you need it, he countered. You're fighting battles on multiple fronts, Eliza. Think of it as tactical support. His framing made me pause. In truth, I was feeling overwhelmed in a way that all my professional crisis management skills couldn't address. The physical toll of chemo combined with the emotional devastation of David's betrayal was a weight unlike anything I'd ever carried. I'll think about it, I conceded as we reached the car. Lucas checked his watch. We have about an hour before. We need to head to the courthouse. Do you want to grab something to eat? Food was the last thing on my mind. Nausea remained a constant companion after chemo, but I knew I needed to keep up my strength. Something light, maybe. And I should. Check in with May before the hearing. As Lucas drove toward a cafe near the courthouse, I called May to get an update. The judge's initial ruling is promising, she reported. Not only did he order the return of funds for medical expenses, but he also seemed concerned about the timing of David's actions. Abandoning a spouse during active cancer treatment doesn't play well, legally speaking. What about his claims to WellTrack? I asked. The company's still my primary concern. We've filed a motion to dismiss those claims outright, based on the premarital founding and your sole intellectual property rights. The flash drive Parker gave you could be very helpful, especially if it shows David accessing confidential company information without authorization. I glanced at my bag where the drive sat. It does. Parker caught him photographing investor agreements and patent applications 2 weeks ago. Interesting timing, May noted. Right around when he must have been planning his exit. This could strengthen our position considerably, potentially even supporting claims of corporate espionage if he's shared that information with competitors. The thought of David not just leaving me but actively undermining my company churned my already unsettled stomach. What had happened to the man I married? The one who had once proudly introduced himself as the spouse of the genius founder? I'll see you at the courthouse, I said, ending the call as Lucas pulled up to a small cafe. Inside, I managed a few spoonfuls of soup and half a piece of toast, while Lucas gave me concerned glances over his sandwich. My phone buzzed continuously with messages from my team, updates from Tara, who was still at my house, documenting everything David had taken, and a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Jennifer Levine, psycho-oncologist at Oakland. Memorial. Dr. Hansen mentioned you're going through a perfect storm right now. I have an unexpected opening tomorrow at 2 if you'd like to come in. No pressure, just support. I stared at the message, torn between my instinct to handle everything myself and the growing recognition that I was nearing my limits. Everything. Okay, Lucas asked, noticing my expression. Dr. Levine has an opening tomorrow, I said, showing him the text. Take it, he advised immediately. You've got nothing to prove by refusing help, Eliza. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or the unexpected kindness of Dr. Levine reaching out directly, but I found myself typing back, I'll be there. Thank you. As I set down my phone, another notification appeared. An email from Medicorp, the healthcare system we'd been negotiating with for a potential 7-figure licensing deal. My heart sank as I read the subject line. Regarding tomorrow's call, urgent question. With trembling fingers, I opened it, fearing that somehow David had already interfered with our biggest business opportunity to date. Mrs. Cole, the email began formally. We've been contacted by someone claiming to represent WellTrack's intellectual property interests, suggesting we should delay our discussions pending resolution of certain ownership matters. As this contradicts our understanding of your company structure, We wanted to address this directly before tomorrow's call. Anger surged through me, temporarily overwhelming even my physical discomfort. He's already trying to sabotage the Medicorp deal, I told Lucas, showing him the email. Lucas's expression darkened. Can he actually block it? No, but he can create enough uncertainty to make them nervous, I explained, already composing a response. In healthcare tech, perception is critical. If potential partners think there's any question about IP ownership, they'll back away rather than risk future complications. My reply was professional but firm, explaining that my estranged husband had no official role in the company, no ownership stake, and no authority to speak on WellTrack's behalf. I attached our corporate structure documents and offered to address any concerns directly on tomorrow's call. This is getting ugly fast, Lucas observed as I sent the email. It's going to get uglier, I predicted, checking the time. We should head to the courthouse. The Alameda County Family Court building was imposing in that particular way government buildings often are, designed to make ordinary citizens feel small in the face of authority. As we climbed the steps, I spotted David and his attorney already, waiting near the entrance, engaged in intense conversation. May met us at the top of the stairs, immaculate in a charcoal suit that radiated competence and authority. "Ready?" she asked simply. I nodded, straightening my shoulders despite the bone-deep fatigue and nausea that still lingered from chemo. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, professional but understated, nothing that would hide my medical reality. My headscarf, worn more for warmth than vanity as my hair continued to thin, was the same deep blue as the WellTrack logo. David noticed us approaching and fell silent mid-sentence. His eyes widened slightly as he took in my appearance. Had he forgotten, in the mere 24 hours since his dramatic exit, just how visibly ill his wife of 7 years had become? Or had he simply chosen not to see it, even before leaving? Mrs. Cole, his attorney Huntington nodded stiffly. Mr. Barrett. His pointed acknowledgement of Lucas was clearly meant to suggest my brother's presence was somehow inappropriate. Mr. Huntington, May replied evenly. I assume your client is prepared to comply with the emergency order regarding the return of medical expense funds? David shifted uncomfortably. About that? My client will need a brief extension, Huntington interrupted smoothly. Transferring funds of that magnitude requires some time. Interesting, May replied, her tone deceptively casual. Your client managed to transfer them out rather quickly. The judge specifically ordered the return within 24 hours, citing the urgent medical necessity. Before Huntington could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and a clerk called out, Cole versus Cole, emergency hearing. Parties may enter. As we filed into the courtroom, Lucas squeezed my shoulder supportively. Remember why you're fighting, he whispered. I nodded, drawing strength from his presence and from the knowledge that back at the WellTrack office, my team was working diligently to protect what we'd built, not just a company, but a solution. Born from personal loss and dedicated to helping others navigate the healthcare maze that had contributed to my mother's early death. Judge Watkins, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, studied the documents before her as we all took our places. When she looked up, her gaze settled first on me, then moved to David with an expression I couldn't quite read. Before we begin, she said, her voice carrying easily through the courtroom, I want to be clear about something. This court takes a very dim view of financial abandonment during medical crisis. Very dim indeed. David paled slightly, and I felt the first flicker of hope that justice, at least in this initial skirmish, might actually be on my side. The battle for my company, my health, and my future was only beginning. But in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I would fight with everything I had. David had severely underestimated both my resilience and my resolve. That, I realized as the hearing began, would prove to be his most significant miscalculation. If you're enjoying this story about resilience in the face of betrayal, Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling us about a time when you turned adversity into triumph. Now, let's continue with what happened in that courtroom. Mrs. Cole, Judge Watkins addressed me directly. I understand you're currently undergoing chemotherapy treatment. Are you feeling well enough to proceed today? The question caught me off guard. No one had asked about my well-being quite so directly since this nightmare began, except perhaps Dr. Hansen. Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Yesterday was a treatment day, so I'm not at my best, but this matter is too important to delay. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my determination. Very well. Let's address the immediate financial concerns first. For the next 45 minutes, May methodically presented our case, the timing of David's abandonment during my actual chemotherapy infusion, the calculated emptying of accounts containing funds earmarked for my cancer treatment, and his claims against WellTrack despite having no formal role in the company. Throughout May's presentation, I kept my focus on Judge Watkins, avoiding looking at David. But I could feel his gaze on me periodically, assessing, perhaps searching for signs of weakness or fatigue he could exploit. When Huntington presented David's side, his smooth, practiced delivery couldn't disguise the fundamental callousness of their position. Yes, David had taken the money, but it was legally joint property. Yes, the timing was unfortunate, but my medical condition shouldn't deprive David of his rightful assets. And regarding WellTrack, while David wasn't officially employed by the company, his support during its development entitled him to a significant ownership stake. Your Honor, Huntington concluded, marriage is a partnership, and business assets developed during that partnership should be considered joint property, regardless of whose name appears on the paperwork. Judge Watkins' expression remained neutral, but her questions were pointed. Mr. Huntington, are you suggesting that emptying joint accounts while your client's wife was literally receiving cancer treatment shows good faith? Huntington cleared his throat. My client was concerned that emotions might complicate the financial separation. He acted to protect assets that he believed were in jeopardy. In jeopardy from what exactly? The judge pressed. Mrs. Cole's medical expenses? Money that might keep her alive during cancer treatment? From the corner of my eye, I saw David shift uncomfortably in his seat. Furthermore, Judge Watkins continued, turning her attention to David directly. Mr. Cole, are you currently employed? David straightened. Yes, Your Honor, I'm a marketing executive at Vantage Solutions. With a salary of approximately, she prompted, $215,000 annually, plus bonuses, he admitted reluctantly. The judge made a note. And Mrs. Cole's current income situation? May stepped in. Mrs. Cole has been drawing a modest salary of $80,000 from WellTrack while reinvesting most profits back into company growth. Since her diagnosis, she's been working reduced hours, but maintaining leadership responsibilities. Judge Watkins nodded thoughtfully. So, Mr. Cole, with your substantially higher income, you chose to take funds your wife needed for cancer treatment while she's working reduced hours due to that very illness. The question hung in the air, its moral weight palpable. Before David, or his attorney could respond, the judge continued. I've reviewed the financial disclosures, and I'm making the following emergency rulings pending full divorce proceedings. First, Mr. Cole is ordered to return $120,000, not just the $100,000 from my initial order, to a supervised medical expense account within 24 hours. Second, Mr. Cole is barred from making any claims or representations regarding WellTrack to any business partners, investors, or other third parties until ownership is fully determined in court. Third, Mrs. Cole shall have exclusive use of the XI marital home during her medical treatment, with Mr. Cole responsible for continued mortgage payments as the higher-earning spouse. Fourth, a full forensic accounting of all marital assets will commence immediately, with both parties providing complete financial disclosures within 10 days. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me as the judge addressed our most urgent concerns. Beside me, May maintained her professional composure, but I could feel her satisfaction. David, meanwhile, had gone pale, whispering urgently to Huntington, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Huntington began, "regarding the company ownership, we would request an expedited hearing. My client believes significant business decisions are being made that could affect the value of these disputed assets." May responded immediately, "Your Honor, Mrs. Cole founded WellTrack before her marriage. We have extensive documentation showing Mr. Cole's lack of involvement in company operations or decision-making. Any delay in normal business activities could irreparably harm the company's prospects." Judge Watkins considered this briefly. "I'll schedule a separate hearing regarding company ownership in 2 weeks. Until then, Mrs. Cole may continue normal business operations, but no extraordinary transactions, no sale of major assets, no significant new investment rounds, nothing that would fundamentally alter the company's value or structure. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," May and I both responded. As the hearing concluded, I finally allowed myself to look directly at David. The man I had loved, who had vowed to stand by me in sickness and health, wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he conferred with Huntington, his expression a mixture of frustration and calculation that I now recognized had probably been there for months. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Outside the courtroom, Lucas wrapped me in a careful hug. "First round to you," he said quietly. "It's not about winning," I replied, though part of me, the part that still reeled from the shock of David's betrayal, did feel vindicated. "It's about surviving. All of it. The cancer, the divorce, the company challenges." May joined us, tucking documents into her briefcase with practiced efficiency. "You did well in there, Eliza. The judge clearly sees the fundamental injustice of David's actions. But Huntington is right about one thing. We need to prepare thoroughly for the company ownership hearing. That will be the real battle." I nodded, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline of the hearing faded, leaving me with the familiar post-chemo fatigue. "What happens now?" "Now we build our case. I'll need everything. Founding documents, evidence of your work on WellTrack before and during the marriage, proof of David's limited involvement. And we should discuss whether to introduce the evidence of his unauthorized access to company files." As May outlined our next steps, I noticed David and Huntington exiting the courtroom, heading toward us with determined strides. "Eliza," David called, his voice carrying down the corridor. "We need to talk, without the lawyers." Lucas stepped protectively closer to me, but I placed a restraining hand on his arm. "It's okay," I told him, though my heart was pounding. David stopped a few feet away, looking somehow both authoritative in his expensive suit and strangely diminished compared to the partner I'd thought I knew. 5 minutes, I said coolly. Alone, but in public. I gestured to a seating area visible from where Lucas and May stood. David nodded, following me to the bench. For a moment after we sat, neither of us spoke. Up close, I could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Whatever this new life he'd chosen was, it wasn't bringing him peace. "You didn't have to do this," he finally said, waving vaguely toward the courtroom we'd just left. "Taking me to court, making this adversarial." I stared at him, momentarily, speechless at his audacity. "I didn't make this adversarial, David. You did. When you emptied our accounts, when you abandoned me during chemo, when you tried to sabotage the Medicorp deal." He had the grace to flinch at the last accusation. "That wasn't sabotage. They deserved to know there might be ownership complications." "There are no complications. WellTrack was mine before we married, and it's mine now. You know that." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, I know the timing was bad." "Bad?" I interrupted, incredulous. You texted me while poison was literally dripping into my veins to kill the cancer that might otherwise kill me. Bad doesn't begin to cover it. David ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that now only highlighted how unfamiliar he'd become to me. I couldn't do it anymore, Eliza. Watching you suffer, the company consuming whatever energy the cancer didn't take. Where was there room for me? For what I needed? The selfishness of his perspective was breathtaking. That's what marriage is, David. Being there when it's hard. I would have done it for you. Would you? Really? He challenged. You were married to WellTrack long before your diagnosis. I was always second to the company, to your vision, to your mother's legacy. His words struck a nerve, not because they were entirely true, but because they contained just enough truth to sting. I had been singularly focused on building WellTrack, driven by my mother's experience and my belief in the platform's potential to help patients. If you felt that way, we could have talked about it, I said more quietly. Couples therapy, restructuring company responsibilities, anything but this. Instead, you chose the most cruel, most cowardly exit possible. He looked away, unable to counter the simple truth of that statement. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its defensive edge. I want to settle this quickly, Eliza. The stress isn't good for your recovery. The sudden show of concern for my health, after his actions had demonstrated the exact opposite, was almost laughable. If you're worried about my recovery, return the money today, not tomorrow, and drop the claims against my company. David shook his head. I can't do that. I need security too. I've put my career second for years while you built WellTrack. Your career? You make almost 3 times what I do. Money isn't everything. I gave up opportunities, relocated for your company headquarters, which you were fully on board with at the time, I cut in. Don't rewrite our history to justify what you've done, David. Our 5 minutes were nearly up, and Lucas was looking increasingly concerned from his position across the corridor. I stood, needing to end this conversation before my limited energy was completely depleted. I have to go. I have a company to run and cancer to beat. Without you. David stood as well. This doesn't have to be a war, Eliza. I looked at him, really looked at the man I had promised to love forever, now revealed as someone capable of unfathomable betrayal when I needed him most. You declared war when you left me during chemo and tried to take my company. I'm just defending what's mine. As I walked away, rejoining Lucas and May, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. The man I had married was gone, perhaps had never truly existed as I'd believed. But I was still here, still fighting on multiple fronts, and for the first time since receiving David's text in the infusion center, I felt a flicker of something beyond mere survival. I was going to win this battle, all of these battles, not just for myself, but for WellTrack, for my team, and for the patients who needed our solution. David had made the grave mistake of underestimating me, of seeing my illness as weakness, rather than proof of my strength. That miscalculation would ultimately be his undoing. The next morning dawned with the first real sense of clarity I'd felt since David's devastating text. Perhaps it was Judge Watkins's rulings in my favor, or the confrontation in the courthouse hallway that had shown me exactly who my husband had become. Whatever the reason, I woke with a new resolve, not just to survive, but to thrive in spite of everything. At my kitchen table, now serving as our war room, May spread out documents while Lucas prepared a protein-rich breakfast designed to strengthen my chemo-weakened body. The Medicorp call is at 10, I reminded them, checking my phone for updates from the team. It's crucial we project stability despite everything happening behind the scenes. You're sure you're up for it? Lucas asked, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs and avocado toast in front of me. I have to be, I replied simply. This deal could transform WellTrack from promising startup to established healthcare solution. I won't let David's timing rob us of that opportunity. May looked up from her legal briefs. Speaking of timing, David complied with the judge's order. The $120,000 was transferred to the supervised medical expense account this morning. I nodded, unsurprised. David was many things: selfish, cowardly, calculating. But he wasn't stupid enough to defy a direct court order. Now we focus on the company ownership hearing, May continued. I've been reviewing the evidence Parker provided about David accessing confidential files. It's compelling, but we need to consider carefully whether introducing it could create other complications. What kind of complications? Lucas asked, joining us at the table. If David obtained proprietary information and shared it with competitors, it becomes not just a divorce issue, but potentially a criminal one, May explained. That might protect WellTrack in the long run, but it could also create market uncertainty in the short term. I considered this as I forced myself to eat, despite my still queasy stomach. Let's hold that card for now. If David makes genuine ownership claims at the hearing, we can introduce the evidence then. May nodded, making notes. A measured approach makes sense. Now, about Medicorp. I've asked Aiden to lead the call, with me joining to demonstrate continuity, I said. We've prepared a slide directly addressing the company structure and intellectual property ownership without mentioning David by name. Good. Keep it professional, focused on the future, May approved. At 9:45, I settled in my home office, looking as professional as possible in a tailored jacket over comfortable clothes, my silk headscarf arranged to frame my face advantageously. I'd applied just enough makeup to add color to my chemo pallid complexion without appearing to be trying too hard. Behind me, visible in the video frame, was a bookshelf carefully arranged with industry awards WellTrack had won, healthcare reference books, and a framed photo of my mother, my inspiration for creating the platform in the first place. The Medicorp team joined precisely at 10, 4 executives led by Eleanor Washington, their chief innovation officer. Aiden and Parker were already in the virtual room, presenting a united front. Eliza, Eleanor began warmly, we're so pleased you could join us today. We weren't sure given... She trailed off delicately. My health situation? I supplied calmly. Cancer treatment is certainly a challenge, but if anything, it's reinforced the importance of WellTrack's mission. Nothing demonstrates the need for better patient care coordination quite like experiencing the system firsthand. Eleanor nodded appreciatively at my framing. Indeed. Before we dive into specifics, I feel we should address the email we received. I was hoping we might start there, I interjected smoothly. I understand you were contacted regarding potential ownership questions about WellTrack. I want to be completely transparent about that situation. With practiced clarity, I explained that I was going through a divorce, that my estranged husband had no official role in WellTrack, and that the company's legal structure remained unchanged and secure. As you can see in the documentation we've shared, Aiden continued seamlessly, bringing up our corporate structure slide. WellTrack was founded before Eliza's marriage, with all intellectual property and patents registered solely to her and subsequently transferred to the company. All investor agreements and cap tables reflect this clear ownership structure. Eleanor and her team studied the slide, their expressions revealing nothing. One of her colleagues, a sharp-looking man whose nameplate identified him as Raymond Chen, legal counsel, spoke up. While we appreciate the transparency, Mrs. Cole, we've invested significant resources in evaluating this partnership. Any ownership disputes, regardless of their merit, create potential complications. I met his gaze directly through the screen. Mr. Chen, I understand your concern. If I were in your position, I would have the same questions. What I can tell you is this. WellTrack has retained specialized counsel to address these baseless claims expeditiously. The court has already issued preliminary rulings in our favor, including specifically barring my estranged husband from making representations about WellTrack to business partners. I hadn't planned to mention the court order, but Raymond's skepticism made it necessary. The shift in his expression told me it had been the right call. Furthermore, I continued, I believe our mission alignment is too important to let personal matters interfere. Your patients need better coordination tools, and WellTrack has demonstrated exceptional results in our pilot programs. Eleanor nodded, her expression softening. Your candor is appreciated, Eliza, and you're right about the alignment. Our patient satisfaction scores in the pilot units using WellTrack increased by 32% in just 3 months. The tension in the virtual room eased. Noticeably, for the next 40 minutes, we discussed integration timelines, user training approaches, and potential customizations for Medicorp's specific needs. Throughout, I maintained a calm, professional demeanor, despite the fatigue creeping in at the edges of my consciousness. As we neared the scheduled end of our call, Eleanor surprised me. Eliza, I hope you don't mind my asking, but are you currently using WellTrack to manage your own treatment? The question was personal but perfect, an opportunity to reinforce exactly why our solution mattered. I am, I confirmed. In fact, the experience has helped us identify several refinements to the medication tracking and symptom reporting features. Cancer treatment involves complex medication timing and symptom patterns that our system now handles more intuitively. Improvements that will benefit all patients with complicated treatment protocols. Eleanor's expression was appreciative. Turning your personal challenge into product improvements? That's exactly the kind of leadership and commitment we're looking for in a partner. After the call ended with clear next steps and a follow-up scheduled, Aiden sent a private message. Knocked it out of the park, boss. They're still on board. Relief washed over me as I closed my laptop. One crisis averted, for now at least. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly aware of how much energy the call had required. The post-chemo fatigue was intensifying, a heavy weight pressing me into the chair. Lucas appeared in the doorway with a concerned expression. You pushed too hard, didn't you? The call was necessary, I said, not denying his assessment. Medicorp could transform everything for us. He helped me from the chair, guiding me toward the living room couch. Success won't matter if you work yourself into the ground. Your body needs rest to fight the cancer. I knew he was right, but the urgency of protecting WellTrack competed with my physical limitations. As I settled onto the couch, my phone chimed with an incoming message. Dr. Levine, reminding me of our appointment at 2 p.m. I'm not sure I can make it to the hospital today, I admitted to Lucas, my energy reserves critically low. You don't have to, he replied, showing me the message he'd just received. Dr. Levine offered to do this first session via video call, given your situation. The consideration in her offer touched me. Maybe talking to someone who specialized in helping cancer patients navigate life crises wasn't such a bad idea after all. After resting for an hour and managing to eat a small lunch, I connected with Dr. Levine from the comfort of my couch. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps early 40s, with kind eyes and a direct manner I appreciated immediately. Eliza, thank you for making time for this conversation, she began. Dr. Hansen has shared the basics of your situation, both the cancer diagnosis and the recent personal challenges. Why don't we start with what you feel would be most helpful to address first? Her straightforward approach cut through my lingering reluctance. I'm fighting battles on multiple fronts, I said plainly. Cancer, a divorce I didn't see coming, and protecting my company from someone who suddenly wants to claim ownership after contributing nothing to its creation. I need to function effectively through all of it, but I'm not sure how. Dr. Levine nodded. That's an extraordinary convergence of stressors. Many people would be completely overwhelmed by any one of those challenges. What's keeping you going? Right now? The question made me pause. What was keeping me going? It wasn't merely survival instinct. My company, I realized aloud. WellTrack isn't just a business to me. It's my mother's legacy, a solution to problems that contributed to her death, and it's actually helping people navigate the healthcare maze. I can't let David take that or diminish it. So, your sense of purpose is a powerful motivator, Dr. Levine observed. That's significant. Purpose can sustain us through incredible hardship. For the next 45 minutes, we talked about practical strategies for managing stress during cancer treatment, setting boundaries to protect my limited energy, and processing the grief of both my illness and my marriage's end. One thing I'm hearing, Dr. Levine noted near the end of our session, is that you're still trying to make sense of David's actions, searching for the logical thread in behavior that feels incomprehensible to you. Wouldn't anyone? I asked. 7 years of marriage and he leaves by text during chemo? Takes money I need for treatment? Claims ownership of my company? None of it makes sense. Perhaps that's because you're applying your value system to his actions, she suggested gently. Based on what you've described, it seems David may be operating from a place of profound selfishness, putting his desires above everything else, including basic human decency. You're trying to make sense of it through your lens of loyalty and integrity. Her observation struck me with unexpected force. I had been trying to understand David's betrayal through my own ethical framework, one in which abandoning a critically ill spouse was unthinkable. But if Dr. Levine was right, if David was operating from pure self-interest, then his actions didn't need to make moral sense. They only needed to serve his immediate wants. The realization was oddly freeing. I didn't need to understand him anymore. I just needed to protect myself and WellTrack from whatever selfish calculations he might make next. As we concluded the session, Dr. Levine offered a final thought. Eliza, your strength is remarkable, but don't confuse strength with invulnerability. Allow yourself moments to acknowledge the pain, to rest, to lean on your support system. That's not weakness. It's sustainable resilience. After we disconnected, I sat quietly, considering her words. Sustainable resilience. Not just pushing through each crisis by sheer force of will, but building an approach that could carry me through the long battles ahead, the remaining cancer treatments, the divorce proceedings, the company ownership, hearing. Lucas found me still contemplating this when he checked on me a while later. Good session? He asked, noting my thoughtful expression. Surprisingly, yes, I admitted. I need to rethink my approach to all of this. Brute forcing my way through isn't sustainable. He settled beside me on the couch. That's what Tara and I have been trying to tell you. I know. I'm a slow learner. Sometimes. I reached for my phone, scrolling to find Parker's number. But I'm going to start now. I need to make some changes at WellTrack. Create a leadership structure that can function effectively even when I'm having bad days. Lucas smiled, relief evident in his expression. Now you're thinking strategically instead of just reactively. As I began composing a message to my team outlining a more sustainable leadership approach, I felt something I hadn't experienced since David's betrayal, a sense of genuine control, not just desperate scrambling. If I was going to win these battles, I needed to fight smarter, not just harder. David had underestimated me, seeing my illness as weakness. But cancer had taught me more about fortitude than he could possibly understand, and that strength, tempered now with strategic wisdom, would ultimately prove to be my greatest asset in the fights ahead. The next week passed in a blur of legal preparations, company restructuring, and managing my increasingly difficult treatment side effects. My fourth round of chemotherapy hit harder than the previous ones, as the cumulative toxicity began taking a greater toll on my body. But even as I fought waves of nausea and bone-deep fatigue, I pushed forward with implementing the sustainable leadership model at WellTrack. Are you sure about this? Parker asked during our video call, 2 days after I'd outlined my proposal to the team. Giving Zoe and me signatory authority feels like, I don't know, like you're planning for the worst. I adjusted my position on the couch, where I'd been working since the latest chemo session had left me too weak to sit at my desk for long periods. I'm planning for reality, I corrected gently. There will be days, maybe weeks, when treatment leaves me unable to handle day-to-day decisions. The company can't pause every time I'm down for the count. Zoe, also on the call, nodded her understanding. It's prudent leadership, not pessimism. But I do have concerns about timing, given David's claims against the company. It was a valid point. Any significant change to WellTrack's operations could potentially be scrutinized in the upcoming ownership hearing. That's why May has reviewed and approved these changes, I explained. They don't alter ownership or control, they simply create operational redundancy. If anything, they strengthen our position by demonstrating that WellTrack's functioning isn't dependent solely on me. The meeting continued with detailed discussion of which responsibilities would shift and how decisions would be made when I was unavailable. By the end, both Parker and Zoe seemed not just accepting but relieved, a reminder that the stress of recent events had affected my entire team, not just me. After the call ended, Lucas brought me tea and sat beside me, glancing at the notes I'd been making for the ownership hearing. "You're doing the right thing," he said, nodding toward my laptop where the restructuring plan was displayed. "A strong company structure protects everyone. You, the team, the investors." "I know. I just wish it hadn't taken cancer and divorce to make me see it," I admitted, closing the laptop with a sigh. "For too long, I've been the bottleneck for every major decision." Lucas gave me a knowing look. Stubbornness runs in the family. Mom was the same way with her business. The mention of our mother brought a bittersweet smile to my face. Her small but successful graphic design studio had been her pride and joy, but she'd resisted bringing on partners even when rheumatoid arthritis began limiting her ability to work. After her death, going through her business records had been a painful revelation, seeing how much more she might have accomplished with the right support structure. "I'm learning from her mistakes," I said quietly. "And speaking of learning, we need to review the documents May sent over for tomorrow's preparation session." Tomorrow would mark 1 week until the company ownership hearing, and May wanted a full day to prepare me for what promised to be an intense legal battle. David's attorney had filed additional motions claiming that David's support and contributions during our marriage had been instrumental to WellTrack's growth. "First, you need to rest," Lucas insisted. "Doctor's orders, remember? 2 hours of work, then a break." I wanted to argue, but couldn't deny that my body was reaching its limits. The combination of cancer treatment and ongoing stress had left me operating at a fraction of my normal capacity. Reluctantly, I nodded agreement and closed my eyes, allowing the healing sleep my body desperately needed. The sound of voices woke me sometime later. Lucas speaking with someone at the front door. I glanced at my watch. I'd been asleep for nearly 3 hours, longer than intended. As I struggled to fully wake, I heard a familiar voice that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. David. I forced myself up from the couch, wrapping my cardigan tightly around my too thin frame as I made my way to the entryway. There stood my estranged husband, looking uncomfortable under Lucas's hostile glare. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice raspy from sleep. David turned, his expression shifting from irritation to shock as he took in my appearance. I knew how I looked, gaunt, pale, with dark circles under my eyes and a colorful scarf covering my nearly bald head. In the week since he'd seen me in court, the chemo had continued its brutal work, breaking down my body in hopes of saving my life. "Eliza," he said, my name almost a question in his mouth. I tried calling. You didn't answer." "Because we're communicating through our attorneys now," I reminded him, leaning against the wall for support as a wave of dizziness hit me. "Whatever you need to say can go through May." "This isn't about the legal case," he insisted. "It's about Medicorp. I heard they're moving forward with the partnership. That's a mistake, Eliza. Their security protocols don't meet industry standards. It could create massive liability for WellTrack." Lucas stepped between us, his protective instinct flaring. "If you have concerns about WellTrack's business decisions, put them in writing to Eliza's attorney. You're not welcome here." David's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to help. Despite everything, I don't want to see the company fail because of hasty decisions made during a difficult time." The audacity of his statement struck me like a physical blow. After abandoning me during treatment, emptying our accounts, and attempting to claim ownership of my company, he had the nerve to position himself as concerned about WellTrack's well-being? "Your concern is noted," I said coldly. "And completely unnecessary. Medicorp's security protocols exceed federal standards, as you would know if you'd actually been involved in the due diligence process instead of secretly photographing confidential documents." His eyes widened slightly, the first confirmation that Parker's suspicions about his unauthorized access to company files had been correct. "That's not," he began, but I cut him off. "Lucas is right. Any communication needs to go through our attorneys. Now please leave before I call May about this violation of the court's order regarding WellTrack's operations." For a moment, he looked like he might argue further, but something in my expression must have convinced him of my resolve. With a final frustrated glance, he turned and left, the door closing firmly behind him. My legs nearly gave out as the confrontation ended, and Lucas quickly helped me back to the couch. "That was no coincidence," he said grimly, bringing me water, and my next round of medications. "Him showing up right before the ownership hearing, suddenly concerned about Medicorp's security? He's fishing for information." I nodded, the same conclusion already forming in my mind. Or trying to create doubt about my decision-making capacity. Either way, we should let May know. As Lucas made the call, I reflected on the encounter. David had seemed genuinely shocked by my appearance, as if he hadn't fully registered the reality of my illness until that moment. Had he somehow convinced himself I wasn't really that sick? That my cancer was a convenient excuse rather than a life-threatening condition? The thought was both painful and illuminating. Perhaps in his narrative, I was the villain, stubbornly prioritizing my company over our marriage, using my illness to garner sympathy. It would certainly make his abandonment easier to justify to himself and others. May called back within minutes, her concern evident even through the professional tone. "This is problematic," she said after hearing about David's unannounced visit. "He's violated the spirit, if not the letter, of the judge's order by attempting to discuss company operations directly with you. I'll file a notice with the court tomorrow. In the meantime, document everything you can remember about the conversation." He mentioned Medicorp specifically, I noted, remembering his words. "That partnership hasn't been publicly announced yet." "Interesting," May replied thoughtfully. "That suggests he either still has some access to internal company information, or he's been monitoring your business activities through other channels." The implications were disturbing. Was someone on my team feeding information to David? Or had he found some way to monitor communications? After ending the call with May, I immediately contacted Parker, our technical lead. "I need you to do a complete security audit," I told him, explaining David's unexpected visit and his specific knowledge of the Medicorp deal. "Check for any unusual access patterns, review all account activities, and maybe consider whether our email or other systems could be compromised." Parker's expression darkened. "On it immediately. I'll bring in external security consultants if needed. We can use that budget we set aside for the server upgrade." "Do it," I authorized without hesitation. "Whatever resources you need. This isn't just about David anymore. It's about protecting our company's integrity and our clients' trust." After ending the call, I sat in silence for a moment, processing the implications of David's visit. If he was monitoring WellTrack's business activities somehow, what else might he know? What other vulnerabilities might he exploit? The weariness I'd been fighting threatened to overwhelm me. Every day seemed to bring new challenges, new fights requiring energy I increasingly lacked. But beneath the exhaustion A steely determination remained. Whatever game David was playing, I would not allow him to undermine what I had built. Not through legal maneuvers, not through attempted manipulation, not through corporate espionage. Lucas returned with a light dinner and a worried expression. "You should eat something. Tomorrow's prep session with May will be intense." He was right. I needed to maintain my strength for the battles ahead. As I forced myself to eat despite my diminished appetite, I made a decision. It was time to stop. Playing defense. David had brought this war to my doorstep during my most vulnerable moment. Now I would show him exactly who he was up against. The company ownership hearing was 7 days away. For the next week, I would gather every shred of evidence, marshal every resource, and prepare to not just defend WellTrack, but to decisively end David's claims once and for all. Cancer might be draining my physical strength, but it had given me something David clearly lacked: perspective on what truly mattered, and the courage to fight for it with everything I had left. The morning of the company ownership hearing arrived with a strange sense of calm settling over me. After 2 weeks of intense preparation, security audits, and gathering evidence, I felt as ready as I could possibly be given my physical limitations. Parker's security investigation had revealed something stunning. David had installed monitoring software on my laptop during those suspicious 30 minutes in my office. The program had been sending him copies of all my emails, giving him unprecedented access to company operations even after leaving. The discovery was both infuriating and, ironically, incredibly helpful to our case. "This changes everything," May had said when we discovered the breach. "It transforms him from a spouse making dubious ownership claims to someone potentially committing corporate espionage." As Lucas helped me dress for court in a conservative navy suit that hung loosely on my chemo-thinned frame, I reviewed our strategy one final time. "We lead with the founding documentation and intellectual property assignments," I recited. "Establish the premarital creation of WellTrack, then address David's limited involvement throughout. Only if necessary do we introduce the evidence of unauthorized access." Lucas nodded, adjusting my silk headscarf with brotherly tenderness. "May says the judge's demeanor in the preliminary hearings suggests she won't have much patience for David's claims, especially given his behavior during your treatment." "I'm not counting on sympathy," I said firmly. "We win this on facts, not emotion." May was waiting at the courthouse, her expression betraying nothing as we approached. David and Huntington were already there, engaged in urgent whispered conversation that stopped abruptly when they noticed us. "Ready?" May asked simply. I nodded, focusing on steady breathing to manage the fatigue and nausea that had become my constant companions. My last round of chemo had been just 3 days ago, leaving me operating on sheer determination more than physical strength. As we entered the courtroom, I noticed several unexpected faces. Zoe and Parker were there, as was Tara, all providing silent support from the gallery. Even more surprising was the presence of Eleanor Washington from Medicorp, seated quietly in the back row. Judge Watkins called the hearing to order promptly, her stern gaze sweeping over all parties before settling. On the documents before her, "This hearing will address Mr. Cole's claim to ownership interest in WellTrack Inc., founded by Mrs. Cole," she began. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings, but wish to hear directly from both parties. Mr. Huntington, as you're bringing the claim, please proceed first." Huntington rose with practiced confidence. "Thank you, Your Honor. While Mrs. Cole was indeed the technical founder of what eventually became WellTrack, the company's growth and success occurred primarily during her marriage to my client. Mr. Cole provided substantial support, financial, emotional, and practical, that directly enabled the company to reach its current valuation." For the next 20 minutes, Huntington presented a carefully crafted narrative. David as the supportive husband who had sacrificed his own career advancement to prioritize mine, who had contributed ideas and connections that proved vital to WellTrack's development, who had maintained our household while I focused on building the company. It was a masterful distortion of reality, containing just enough truth to sound plausible while completely misrepresenting the nature of our relationship and David's actual involvement with WellTrack. When Huntington concluded, Judge Watkins turned to May. "Your response, counselor?" May rose calmly. "Your Honor, Mr. Huntington has presented an interesting work of fiction. The reality, supported by extensive documentation, is quite different." With methodical precision, May dismantled Huntington's claims. She presented WellTrack's founding documents, dated 14 months before our wedding. She showed my original code repositories and design documents, created entirely by me. She introduced affidavits from early employees confirming David's absence from company operations and decision-making. Furthermore, May continued, Mr. Cole's claim that he sacrificed career advancement is directly contradicted by his employment records, showing promotions and significant salary increases throughout the marriage, reaching an income nearly triple that of Mrs. Cole. I watched David's expression as May systematically destroyed his narrative. The confident smirk he'd worn during Huntington's presentation gradually faded, replaced by growing concern as document after document contradicted his claims. Judge Watkins studied each piece of evidence carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions that suggested she was unconvinced by David's position. When May concluded her initial presentation, the judge turned her attention directly to me. "Mrs. Cole, I'd like to hear from you personally about Mr. Cole's involvement in WellTrack. To what extent did he participate in company development or operations?" I rose slowly, grateful for Lucas's steadying hand on my elbow. The courtroom seemed to swim slightly before my eyes, a side effect of the chemo, but I focused on Judge Watkins and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, David had no formal role in WellTrack at any point. He attended some social events with clients and occasionally offered marketing suggestions based on his professional experience. But he was neither an employee, officer, advisor, nor investor in the company." "Did he contribute financially to the business?" the judge pressed. "No, Your Honor. All startup funding came from my savings prior to our marriage, followed by angel investors and eventually our seed round. Our household finances were largely separate, with joint accounts only for shared expenses. My WellTrack salary, when I finally started drawing one, went into my personal account." Judge Watkins nodded, making notes before turning to David. "Mr. Cole, what specific contributions do you believe entitle you to ownership in your wife's company?" David stood, straightening his expensive tie. "Your Honor, my contributions were less tangible but no less valuable. I was Eliza's sounding board for every major decision. I introduced her to key contacts who became investors. I maintained our home life so she could focus entirely on building WellTrack. Without my support, the company simply wouldn't exist in its current form." Something in his tone, the practiced sincerity that I now recognized as manipulation, strengthened my resolve. This man had abandoned me during cancer treatment, stolen funds I needed to stay alive, and now stood in court claiming credit for my life's work. Judge Watkins seemed to detect the same false note. "Do you have documentation of these contributions? Emails discussing company strategy? Records of investor introductions that yielded actual investments?" David hesitated, glancing at Huntington. "My role was more informal, Your Honor." "I see," the judge replied, her tone revealing nothing. "Mrs. Zhang, do you have anything further?" This was the moment we had prepared for, whether to reveal David's corporate espionage. May and I had discussed it extensively, weighing the potential impact on WellTrack's reputation against the definitive advantage it would give us legally. May gave me a questioning glance, and I nodded slightly, having made my decision. "Yes, Your Honor," May said. "We have recently discovered evidence that Mr. Cole has been unlawfully accessing WellTrack's confidential information, both before and after separating from Mrs. Cole." The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath as May presented the findings from Parker's security investigation. The surveillance software installed on my computer, the emails David had accessed, his attempt to interfere with the Medicorp partnership using information he had no legitimate way of knowing. David's face drained of color as the evidence mounted. Huntington appeared genuinely shocked, suggesting David hadn't shared this aspect of his actions with his own attorney. Additionally, May continued, we have security footage showing Mr. Cole photographing confidential company documents without authorization approximately 2 weeks before he abandoned Mrs. Cole during her cancer treatment. Judge Watkins's expression darkened as she reviewed the evidence. Mr. Cole, these allegations are extremely serious. Do you deny installing surveillance software on your wife's computer or photographing company documents without authorization? David conferred hurriedly with Huntington before responding. Your Honor, as Mrs. Cole's husband, I believed I had implicit permission to review company materials. I was concerned about business decisions being made while she was undergoing treatment. That might affect our marital assets. It was the wrong response. Judge Watkins's expression hardened further. Mr. Cole, nothing gives a spouse the right to install surveillance software or access confidential business documents without explicit authorization, regardless of marital status. These actions potentially violate several state and federal laws. Turning to Huntington, she continued, Counselor, in light of this evidence, do you wish to proceed with your client's ownership claim? Huntington, clearly recognizing the shift in momentum, attempted damage control. Your Honor, regardless of these allegations, which we would need time to properly address, the underlying question of Mr. Cole's contributions to WellTrack during the marriage remains valid. No, it doesn't, Judge Watkins interrupted firmly. What I'm seeing is evidence that Mr. Cole not only failed to demonstrate legitimate contributions to WellTrack that would entitle him to ownership, but actively engaged in potentially criminal behavior to access company information after separation. She shuffled the papers before her decisively. I am prepared to rule on this matter today. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Mr. Cole has no legitimate claim to ownership interest in WellTrack, Inc. Further, I am referring the evidence of unauthorized computer access to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation. The relief that flooded through me was so intense it nearly took my remaining strength. Lucas's arm around my shoulders kept me upright as Judge Watkins continued. Additionally, Mr. Cole is permanently barred from making any representations regarding WellTrack to any third parties, attempting to access any company information, or contacting WellTrack employees, investors, or business partners for any reason. Violation of this order will result in contempt charges. David sat stunned, the full impact of his miscalculation finally registering. Not only had his ownership claim failed completely, but he now faced potential criminal charges and was permanently severed from any connection to WellTrack. As Judge Watkins concluded the hearing, Huntington immediately began damage control, speaking urgently to David about next steps. May gathered our documents, a subtle smile of satisfaction on her normally impassive face. Congratulations, she said quietly. That was a complete victory. Eleanor Washington approached as we prepared to leave, her professional demeanor softened by genuine warmth. Remarkable fortitude, Eliza. Medicorp is more confident than ever in our partnership decision. The validation from one of our most important business partners added another layer to the victory. Not only had we defeated David's claims, but we'd strengthened a critical relationship in the process. Outside the courthouse, my team waited with barely contained excitement. Parker immediately launched into details of additional security measures being implemented, while Zoe simply hugged me, carefully, mindful of my frail state. What happens now? Tara asked, once the initial celebration subsided. Now, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. We focus on what truly matters, finalizing the Medicorp partnership, continuing to improve WellTrack, and me beating cancer once and for all. The sense of closure was profound. David's betrayal had been devastating, but in forcing me to fight for what I'd built, He had inadvertently strengthened both me and WellTrack. The company's leadership structure was more robust, our security more sophisticated, our team more united than ever before. As Lucas helped me into the car, I caught a glimpse of David exiting the courthouse, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. Our eyes met briefly across the plaza, his full of resentment, mine simply determined. No words were exchanged, none were needed. The battle was over, and he had lost. 6 months later. Are you ready for this? Lucas asked, helping me adjust the simple but elegant black dress I'd chosen for the occasion. I nodded, studying my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the cancer patient who had faced David in court half a year earlier. My hair had begun growing back, a soft pixie of chestnut curls framing my face. I'd regained some of the weight chemo had stolen, and color had returned to my cheeks. Most importantly, my latest scans showed no evidence of disease. The official terminology for remission. More than ready, I replied, slipping on the sapphire earrings that had been a gift from the WellTrack team to celebrate my final treatment. This moment has been a long time coming. The journey hadn't been easy. After the ownership hearing, I'd faced 4 more brutal rounds of chemotherapy, followed by radiation and reconstructive surgery. The divorce had finalized 3 months ago, with David receiving significantly less than he'd initially demanded after his courtroom behavior, and the evidence of his surveillance had thoroughly soured the judge's view of him. Now, standing in the lobby of San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel, surrounded by my team, I prepared to announce what we had kept carefully confidential until this moment: the acquisition of WellTrack by Medicorp's parent company for $52 million. A deal that would make our technology available to hospitals and healthcare systems nationwide, while providing life-changing returns for our early employees and investors. As I stepped to the podium, facing a room full of investors, employees, media representatives, and healthcare industry executives, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with my mother's illness, fueled by my determination to improve patient care coordination, had led to this triumphant moment. 5 years ago, I began, my voice strong and clear. I watched my mother struggle to navigate a healthcare system that seemed designed to confuse rather than heal. 3 years ago, I launched WellTrack with a simple mission: to give patients the tools to coordinate their own care when the system fails them. 1 year ago, I faced the dual challenges of cancer and betrayal, fighting for my life and my company simultaneously. The room was silent, every person engaged with the story that had become something of a legend in startup circles. Today, I'm proud to announce that WellTrack will become part of the Medicorp family, bringing our patient-centered coordination tools to millions nationwide. This acquisition isn't just a business success story. It's proof that purpose-driven technology can transform healthcare while creating value for everyone involved. As I continued outlining the details of the acquisition and our vision for WellTrack's future, I caught sight of my core team in the front row: Parker, whose technical brilliance had built the platform and whose vigilance had helped save it; Zoe, whose operational expertise had kept everything running during my worst days; Aiden, whose relationship building had secured our critical partnerships. The Brie. Applause when I concluded was thunderous, a validation not just of WellTrack's technology, but of the resilience it had taken to reach this moment. As I stepped away from the podium, Eleanor Washington embraced me warmly before taking my place to share Medicorp's perspective on the acquisition. Lucas appeared at my side, pride evident in his expression. "Mom would be over the moon," he said, quietly. "She would," I agreed, thinking of how our mother's healthcare struggles had ultimately led to a solution that would help countless others. This is her legacy, too. The reception afterward was a blur of congratulations, questions from reporters, and discussions about WellTrack's future. I moved through it all with a sense of graceful closure, knowing that while I would remain involved as an advisor, the day-to-day leadership would transition to new hands as I focused on my continued recovery and whatever might come next. It was nearly midnight when I finally returned to my hotel suite, exhausted but fulfilled. As I kicked off my heels and sank onto the plush sofa, my phone chimed with a text from Tara. Just saw the acquisition news online. 52 million, absolutely incredible. So proud of you. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate? I smiled, typing back a quick agreement before setting my phone aside. On the coffee table lay the evening's financial newspapers, their headlines announcing the acquisition and briefly recounting the story that had captured the industry's imagination. Cancer survivors' health app sells for $52 million after X tried to claim ownership. The simplistic headline couldn't capture the full journey, the terror of the cancer diagnosis, the shock of David's betrayal, the grueling treatments endured while fighting to protect what I'd built. It couldn't convey the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I would survive to see WellTrack fulfill its potential, or the moments of doubt when the combined weight of illness and divorce had nearly crushed my spirit. But perhaps that was fitting. Those struggles had been necessary chapters in the story, not its conclusion. The conclusion was this moment of triumph, not just financial success, but the knowledge that my mother's experience, my illness, and even David's betrayal had all contributed to creating something that would genuinely help people navigate their most vulnerable moments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new beginnings. For tonight, I allowed myself to simply savor the victory that had seemed so impossible a year ago, when a text message during chemo had shattered my world. David had left me at my lowest moment, believing he was entitled to claim part of what I'd built. Instead, he had inadvertently pushed me to fight harder than I ever had before. For my company, for my health, for my future. In trying to take what wasn't his, he had ultimately strengthened my resolve to protect what mattered most. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the lessons of the past year, about resilience, purpose, and the strength that can emerge from our most broken moments. Cancer and betrayal had taken much from me, but they had given unexpected gifts as well. Clarity about what truly mattered, appreciation for loyal allies, and the unshakable knowledge of my own capacity to overcome seemingly impossible odds. Tomorrow, life would continue its forward momentum. Tonight, I rested in the quiet satisfaction of having faced the worst and emerged not just intact, but victorious. If this story of resilience and triumph against the odds has inspired you, please hit that subscribe button right now. Our channel is dedicated to sharing stories of extraordinary courage and determination that will motivate you to overcome whatever challenges you're facing in your own life. Every week, we bring you new tales of people who refused to be defined by their circumstances, who found strength when they thought they had nothing left to give. From health battles to business victories, from personal betrayals to unexpected comebacks, these are the stories that remind us what human spirit is truly capable of. Subscribe today to make sure you never miss an episode and hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we post new content. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories with the world. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope and perseverance, please share this video with them. Sometimes the right story at the right moment can make all the difference. Thanks for watching, and remember, your greatest challenges often contain the seeds of your most meaningful triumphs. See you in the next video.